Colin all cruisers, my name is Colin and welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm going to continue my Cruising 101 series. Last time we looked at picking the perfect cabin type. If you missed that video, then I'll put a link to it here. So last time cabin type, this time we're going to look at cabin location. That is equally important when choosing your cabin or choosing the location on the ship. So let's take a look at where the best places on the ship will be for a cabin. Now, the answer to this question is going to be different for everyone. Similar to the cabin types, we all have our own preferences and our own things that we like. So I just want to share some things that you might want to take into account or into consideration when picking your cabin. Typically, when you get to a port of call, you will disembark the ship at each port from either deck 1 or deck 0, depending on the cruise line. So that's the very bottom. There are more decks below that, but they're the crew quarters. This is kind of like water level or port level. The higher up the ship you are, the further away from decks 1 and 0 you're going to be. Now the reason I mention that is typically in a port of call, it can sometimes get a little bit busy getting back onto the ship, and it can be a nightmare sometimes trying to get an elevator. If you are someone that relies on an elevator, or perhaps you can only manage a few flights of stairs at a time, then you might want to take that into consideration, that it is going to be difficult to get an elevator sometimes on some itineraries and some cruise ships, but it is a problem I've seen, and it is quite a common problem. Now, if you're fit and can take the stairs up 10 flights no problem, then that's great. You know, that's probably not an issue for you. But if you can maybe only manage 2 flights at a time, you may want to take that into account. But that's only one part of your cruise. You might be happy to wait for the elevator, then that's fine. So let's talk about some of the other areas of the ship that you may want to consider or you may want to avoid. Have a look at where the main entertainment areas of the ship are. So what you'll probably find is the theatre, there might be some kind of promenade area, the shops, a couple of bars. They're usually located somewhere maybe around about decks 4, 5 or 6. If you're going to be positioned directly beneath a bar, take into account what the opening hours of that bar are. If you like to go to bed, 9, 10 p.m. or even 11 p.m, but it's a bar that maybe turns into a nightclub and is open until, 2 in the morning, that might be a problem for you. It could cause a lot of noise or create a lot of noise that might cause you to have a sleepless night. If you're the party animal, however, and you're the one that's going to be out till 2 in the morning, then that might actually be a good cabin for you because it means that it's not going to have a lot of noise in the morning. So that's something to consider. Another one is if you're under the galley. So not under the dining room itself, but under the galley where they're preparing all the food. So I have had a cabin that was under the galley once before. I was on deck 5, the galley was on deck 6, and it did get a little bit noisy at night, usually around 11 p.m, between 11 and midnight, when they would have the cleaning crew come in to clean the galley, it would get a little bit noisy. And then also first thing in the morning, maybe around 5 a.m, as the crew were coming in to start preparing breakfasts for the day, it could get a little bit noisy. So that's bars, restaurants, kitchens. These are areas that you want to just have a look at. You can check out the ship map to see is your cabin actually going to sit beneath any of those. And if so, you may want to just check the opening hours of those venues and just think it's not always just when it's open, but there might be cleanup crews and things happening outside of those hours. Alright, let's move a bit further up the ship now. We're going to look at the decks, typically where the pools are located. These are also usually the decks where you might have the buffet on the ship located, and there's usually some kind of activity that might be kind of noisy. You'll have things like basketball courts, you might have surf simulators, go-karts, roller coasters, water slides, all kinds of things that can generate a bit of noise for the cabins underneath them. So again, just have a look at what's actually on your ship, what's on deck, and what might generate a little bit of noise for you while you're trying to relax in your cabin. And again, the poolside noise is typically contained to pool hours, but one thing you might want to consider if you are going to be beneath one of the pool areas is the collecting and the dispersing of the sun loungers. So in the evenings, the sun loungers will get pulled in to make way for some evening activities out on deck, but then early in the morning at 5 a.m. or something like that, they're going to start pulling all those sun loungers out again, ready for people to sunbathe the next day. So although the noise from other cruisers might be contained, the noise from the crew setting up and taking things down, again, is just something to consider. You'll also want to just be careful if you are going to be under the buffet area for similar reasons. There's a lot of chair scraping, a lot of moving around, and a lot of clatter. Now, I have had a cabin that was slightly under the buffet. I actually checked the ship map to see kind of exactly where it would sit, and I managed to find an area that would have as little foot traffic as possible based on my knowledge of the layout of the ship. And I didn't hear anything at all. With ships with go-karts and roller coasters and things like that, with those kind of big activities, you will find that the noise from those activities can carry across several decks. I only bring that up because you'll probably think, oh my gosh, I can hear this noise. It's really, really noisy. It's terrible. Don't worry too much about that though. These typically have very limited opening hours. They tend not to be open beyond, say, 6 p.m. So any noise that you're hearing from those kind of big activities will typically be self-contained hours, and it's not going to be a problem for you the majority of the time. If you have a balcony cabin or a cabin with a balcony, you are also going to want to consider your proximity to any smoking areas. If you're not a smoker, now of course if you are a smoker or you're just not bothered by the smell of smoke, then it's probably not an issue. But I have gone on a couple of cruises where I thought I was far enough away from the smoking area, but that smell carried all the way up and I could smell it on my balcony. So it's just something to be considerate of when you're looking at these deck plans. Look for where the smoking areas are and just think, are you going to be near any of them? Is your cabin near any of them? Might the smell of smoke travel over to your cabins? So in terms of the pros, obviously, if you're someone that enjoys spending most of your time out at the pool and, you know, you'll be eating the buffet for breakfast, buffet for lunch, and just hanging out by the pool most of the day, you probably are going to want a cabin that's quite high up so that you can quickly get back to the cabin if you need to make, change your swimming costume, or if you've got kids and you want to, change theirs up, or even if you just need to go back to the cabin to grab a book or anything at all. So that might be one of the reasons that you do want to be up by the pool deck or near the pool deck, especially with the buffet there. Or you may choose to be slightly lower down because you prefer to have closer proximity to the bars and the restaurants and the kind of more nightlife side of things. So, it's totally up to you. It's something to think about in terms of your personality and what you're looking to get out of your cruise in terms of where on the ship that you would prefer to be located. Alright, so that's us looked at the different decks that you might want to choose based on your preferences and based on your personality and what you're expecting from a cruise. But now let's take a look at where, in terms of the position on the ship, that you might want to be located. So there's 3 sections of the ship. You're going to have forward, which is the front part of the ship. You're going to have the aft, which is the rear end of the ship. And then you're going to have mid, which is obviously the middle of the ship. The middle of the ship, if you're picking your own cabin, for most cruise lines typically is a little bit more expensive, and there's a reason for that. The middle of the ship, you're actually kind of a little bit closer to everything because you're closer to the stuff at the back and the front, being in the middle. You don't have too far to walk. It's a bit easier to get elevator access that's convenient for you because all the elevators are essentially convenient for you. But the single biggest reason that a lot of people like to travel or like to pick a cabin in the middle of the ship is if you're prone or worried about motion sickness. If you think about the ship moving in water. Now, the ships don't typically move like this. The ships do have stabilizers, but if there is any motion, this part, the forward and the back have the biggest motion, whereas the center of the ship is the center of gravity. It has the least motion in it. So if you are concerned about travel sickness or motion sickness, or it's just you're a little bit worried about it if you've never cruised before, then definitely you're going to want to pick a cabin in the middle of the ship. Pay that little bit extra. You're going to feel less motion in the ocean that way. On that note, I just mentioned rocking and motion on the ships. If you are watching this and you're thinking about taking your first cruise and it is something that worries you, please don't be too worried about it. All modern ships these days have stabilizers. So they counter the waves. So if the waves are making the ship go like that, the ship's pushing against it so that the ship essentially just stays straight. You will feel a little bit of motion as it's moving. The stabilizers aren't going to keep it 100% perfect, but it doesn't rock. You don't feel that motion. That being said, there's plenty of remedies, medications, homeopathic treatments. There's all kinds of things to help people. I often see people with ear patches on. I see people with the wristbands on. You can get Dramamine from your doctor. Please do your research. There's lots of different things that you can try to try and counter any potential motion sickness that you might have. Alright, so we've taken a look at the different room types in our last video. We've taken a look at the different locations on the ship. I hope you find that useful if you're planning your first cruise, or even if you are a seasoned cruiser. Hopefully you learned a little bit out of this video as well. If you did enjoy this, please do give me that big thumbs up. It does help the channel to be noticed more, and what also really helps me, and I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart if you do this, is if you could subscribe to the channel, and if you select the notifications, you'll be notified next time I do drop a video. If you are interested in more videos from this series, I am putting them all into a playlist called Cruising 101, so do check out some other videos in that series as they become available. But for now, happy cruising!